Well, Nazarbayev's resignation goes into effect on Wednesday. Joining me in our Washington studio is Yuval Weber. He's the Kennan Institute Associate Professor at the Daniel Morgan Graduate School of National Security. Yuval, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me on.
Were you surprised by this decision for Nazarbayev to step down after 3 decades in power?
Well, there's an old joke in Russia where I lived for many years where you say an event happened after I predicted it, but before I expected it. So we all know at some point Nazarbayev had to leave office, but certainly the timing of the resignation was a surprise.
So what do you make of the timing? Why now?
Well, I think it comes from basically observing regional politics. In neighboring Uzbekistan, I believe it was 2 years ago at this point, the longtime ruler, Islam Karimov, who had also been in power since the late 1980s, early 1990s, he had died in office. And after that, his family was driven from power. His elder daughter has been put in jail for many bribery charges. And I think what Mr. Nazarbayev really saw is that if there's going to be a transition, he'd rather be the one in charge of it. So he has not only kept those positions of
the head of the country's Security Council.
Yes, so that is responsible for overseeing the domestic and foreign policy of the country.
So he's still going to call the shots.
And he controls the party. And he has a special constitutional status called El-Bashi, which is the leader of the nation or the father of the nation. And that has a special prerogative of which he cannot be arrested or indicted, both him and his family. So he basically put in one of his most trusted lieutenants, and he'll figure for however long he remains alive and healthy, that he can manage that transition for the next several years.
So let's talk about his replacement. New acting President Tokayev, Speaker of the Upper House of Parliament. What do we know about him? And I'm assuming he's expected to follow suit with all the policies of Nazarbayev.
Sure, so we won't expect much in the way of big policy changes. And 2 of his previous jobs were as Prime Minister and as Foreign Minister. And his big portfolios when he was Foreign Minister was obviously dealing with the day-to-day of China and Russia. And those are 2 of the most important countries to Kazakhstan. It's the 2 big neighbors that they have. So what we can expect sort of looking at Kazakhstan is the maintenance of the status quo. No big changes domestically, no big changes in terms of foreign policy, and really no big changes to Mr. Nazarbayev.
So how do you think this is playing out in China and Russia?
So they all knew at some point that Nazarbayev had to go. But if he's going to go, to put in someone trustworthy after him, to keep sure that he has all these institutional prerogatives in order to maintain the domestic politics of Kazakhstan, what they're looking at is this is probably the best case scenario. The next person won't have the decades of experience, but he'll have the next best thing, which is the guy with the decades of experience helping him.
Nazarbayev was behind extensive economic market reforms. How popular was he? And this is someone who also faced a lot of criticism in the West.
So sure, so in terms of what are the positive aspects, what Nazarbayev did is he called Kazakhstan's position in the world having a multi-vector foreign policy. That if he was too close to Russia, then he'd be ignoring China. If he was too close to China, he'd be ignoring the big neighbor, but also bringing the United States in. So having diversification of foreign partners, and particularly bringing in the West through America and European oil companies, that's essentially what helped with diversification. What hasn't gone well in terms of economic reform is that it's still a petro-state. There have been issues with labor riots. There has been sort of widespread dissatisfaction in the sense of how is anything going to change, if at all? So that's sort of dissatisfaction from below.
All right, we'll leave it there. Yuval Weber, thank you so much.
Thank you.